Silence filled the ZYRRX flagship. The Dominion's once mighty fleet drifted powerless in Earth's orbit, their AI cores crippled by Patel's virus. On the planet below, ZYRRX warriors stood frozen mid-battle, their connection to their command structure severed. The war was over, or so they thought. Vance's earpiece crackled with an urgent transmission from Earth's Defense Command. Captain, we're detecting a new fleet inbound, bigger than the ZYRRX and moving fast. He exchanged a look with his team. This wasn't over. A new threat. General Varesh had barely risen to his feet when his ship's emergency alarms blared. Even with their systems crippled, some instruments still functioned, and they all pointed to one terrifying truth. Impossible, Varesh muttered, staring at the data. The Kurzak. Vance narrowed his eyes. Who? Varesh turned to him, mandibles clicking with something humans rarely saw in the ZYRRX: fear. The ones who hunt us. Sparks groaned. You mean there's something worse than you guys? Varesh didn't dignify the comment with a response. Instead, he limped toward a damaged console and activated a manual override. A hologram flickered to life. It showed a massive, jagged fleet, black as void, ships bristling with organic-looking weapons that pulse like beating hearts. These were not warships built with precision. They were grown, like tumors in the fabric of space. The Kurzak are parasites, Varesh admitted, his voice low. We underestimated humanity, and now they smell our weakness. He turned to Vance, mandibles clicking. If they land, they will not conquer. They will consume. A heavy silence fell over the room. Sparks exhaled. So let me get this straight. You invaded us, got your exoskeletal asses handed to you, and now we have to help you fight your bullies. Patel rubbed her temples. We just disabled your entire fleet. What do you expect us to do? Politely ask them to go away? Vance's mind raced. He looked at Patel, then at Varesh. No, we don't need to fight them conventionally. He turned to the damaged console. We still have your fleet's long-range transmitters, right? Varesh hesitated. Some, yes. Vance smirked. Then let's give the Kurzak a reason to look elsewhere. The grand deception. The plan was insane. Even Patel, who had spent the last month hijacking alien systems for fun, hesitated. You want to fake an entire armada? Vance nodded. We made your fleet see fake signals before, right? Let's do it again, but bigger. Using the remaining functional ZYRRX transmitters, Patel began broadcasting ghost fleet signatures across the system. Within minutes, the empty void between planets was teeming with thousands of false human battleships, each signal mimicking an active warship. Each position as if it had been lying in wait. To the Kurzak sensors, it would look like they had just walked into a trap. From deep space, the Kurzak fleet slowed. Their ships, more living organisms and metal constructs, shifted like a school of predators sensing something off. Their pulsating weapons dimmed slightly as they scanned the battlefield. Aboard their command ship, intelligence beyond human comprehension calculated risk. They had expected a feast on weakened prey, a depleted ZYRRX force, an unprepared humanity. But instead, their sensors now screamed warnings of an overwhelming human counterforce, ships ready to obliterate them the moment they advanced. For the first time, the hunters hesitated. Then, in eerie silence, the Kurzak fleet turned away, choosing to vanish back into the void rather than risk annihilation. The war that wasn't. On the bridge, Patel let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. They're leaving? Sparks grinned. We just bluffed an intergalactic horror into retreating. I love us. Li Xiu, who had remained silent through the entire ordeal, finally spoke. They'll be back one day, she said. But next time, they'll know we're not easy prey. Varesh watched the retreating fleet, his expression unreadable. The ZYRRX had come to conquer and left as fools. But more than that, they had learned something. You fight like no species we have ever encountered, he admitted. Unpredictable, ruthless, but also adaptable. Vance turned to him. So what happens now? You go home and pretend this never happened. Varesh hesitated. Then, with something like reluctant respect, he extended an arm. We are warriors, he said. But we are not fools. We will not make war against you again. Vance considered the alien's massive, clawed hand. Then he shook it. Sparks raised an eyebrow. So, does this mean we just made frenemies with space bugs? Li Xiu smirked. I think it means we survived. Epilogue. Days later, humanity stood victorious. Not through brute force, but through ingenuity, deception, and sheer audacity. The ZYRRX fleet limped home, humbled but wiser. The Kurzak, for now, had turned their gaze elsewhere. As for Earth, humanity didn't celebrate, not in the traditional sense. They simply got back to work, already preparing for whatever the universe threw at them next. Because if this war had taught the galaxy one thing, it was this. You only wage war against humanity once. General Varesh was livid. The war should have been over by now. Instead of a swift conquest, the ZYRRX Dominion had been outmaneuvered, outwitted, and humiliated. Their fleet, the pride of their empire, was in disarray. Entire squadrons had been lured into asteroid fields by human decoy signals. Their supply lines were severed, their encrypted communications hijacked, and their planetary invasion forces, previously so confident, were now terrified of every shadow. And now, Earth stood before them. Varesh loomed over the holographic display of the Sol system, his clawed fingers flexing. Their fleet was still formidable, battle-worn but massive. Earth's defenses were strong, but conventional warfare would break them eventually. Yet, deep down, Varesh felt something he had never felt before in battle. Doubt. He had spent weeks fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of engagement. They were chaotic, inventive, and disturbingly fearless. Their soldiers improvised when outgunned. Their engineers repurposed enemy tech on the fly. Their hackers had turned his own fleet against itself. Now, as the ZYRRX prepared for their final assault on humanity's homeworld, Varesh suspected that if they didn't end this here and now, they never would. Full deployment, he ordered. Leave nothing to chance. Earth, the last line of defense. Captain Elias Vance surveyed the war room deep beneath New Pentagon, the massive underground command center where humanity's last great gambit was being planned. Across the room, Dr. Aisha Patel was hunched over a tablet, adjusting the final parameters of her virus bomb, the digital weapon she had embedded deep in the ZYRRX fleet's AI infrastructure. It had already caused havoc among their systems. But now, she was preparing the kill switch. We have one shot at this, she muttered. If they realize what we're doing, they'll firewall their systems and adapt. Beside her, Corporal Li Xiu studied a feed of ZYRRX troop formations. Unlike the others, she had spent time trying to understand the enemy beyond just their tactics. She had read their war doctrines, their philosophy, their history. They don't understand surrender, she said, but they understand fear. Sparks O'Malley leaned back in his chair, chewing on a protein bar, like they weren't hours away from planetary annihilation. Yeah? And what exactly scares a bunch of 8-foot chitin-plated war bugs? Li Xiu smiled grimly, losing control. Vance nodded. Then let's take it from them. The battle for Earth begins. The ZYRRX fleet descended upon the planet like a hammer. Thousands of warships, swarms of fighters, and troop carriers rained down to the atmosphere, their weapons scorching the sky. Humanity met them with everything they had. Orbital railguns fired from hidden platforms on the moon. Swarm drones flooded the upper atmosphere, disrupting enemy formations. Cities activated their last resort energy shields, forcing the ZYRRX to deploy ground forces instead of simply glassing the surface. It was chaos, exactly as the humans intended. From the Resolute, Vance led a surgical strike through the enemy blockade. His team's target, the ZYRRX command flagship, the Dominion's pride. If they could board and deploy Patel's kill switch directly into the ZYRRX AI core, they could cripple the entire fleet in one move. Approaching the target, Sparks called from the cockpit, maneuvering their stolen ZYRRX dropship through the chaos of the battle. I'm about 70% sure they still think we're one of theirs. Not reassuring, Patel muttered. Hey, 70% is passing. The moment the ship docked inside the ZYRRX flagship's hangar, Vance and his team stormed out, weapons ready. They didn't have much time. The heart of the enemy, Fighting through the ZYRRX corridors was brutal. The enemy was larger, stronger, and heavily armored, but the humans had speed, explosives, and sheer spite. Vance's rifle cut down 2 guards before they could react. Sparks tossed an improvised shock grenade, a combination of human tech and scavenged ZYRRX power cells, into a squad, sending them into convulsions. Li Xiu, uncharacteristically cold, fired precise, efficient shots, dropping ZYRRX warriors before they could call for reinforcements. Finally, they reached the AI core chamber, a vast, humming cathedral of alien machinery. Patel rushed forward, plugging her device into mainframe. "Give me 60 seconds." They didn't have 60 seconds. Varesh himself stormed into the chamber, flanked by elite guards. "You think you could end this with a trick?" he snarled. Van stepped forward, raising his weapon, but Varesh was faster. With a blur of movement, he backhanded Vance across the room, sending him crashing into a console. Patel barely managed to dodge a swinging claw, her hand still flying over the device's interface. Li Xiu emptied her rifle into Varesh's guards, but the general didn't slow. He lunged for Patel, his massive form towering over her. Then Sparks tackled him. It was an objectively terrible idea. Varesh was twice his size and covered in armor like chitin. Sparks barely managed to lock his arms around the general's mandibles before Varesh threw him off like a rag doll. But it had been enough. Patel pressed the final key. "Too late," she whispered. The ship lurched. Across the fleet, ZYRRX ships flickered and went dark. Their AI, the central nervous system of their entire war machine, collapsing on itself. On the battlefield below, ZYRRX warforms froze mid-charge, their link to the Dominion severed. Their once imposing fleet now drifted leaderless. Varesh fell to his knees, mandibles twitching in disbelief. Impossible? Vance, groaning as he stood, wiped blood from his chin. He looked at Varesh with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. "You only waged war against humanity once," he said. "The battle was over. Or so they thought." From deep space, a new signal appeared. Something else was coming. The ZYRRX expected a war of attrition. They got a war of confusion. When the invasion of New Kyoto, humanity's largest colony in the sector, began, the ZYRRX forces deployed in perfect formation, ranks of insectoid warriors, heavy aerial bombardment, and mechanized walkers designed to crush resistance underfoot. Every scenario in their war doctrine suggested the humans would surrender after their infrastructure collapsed. Instead, the ZYRRX command ship intercepted a transmission from the colony's main network. It wasn't a distress signal. It wasn't a desperate plea for peace. It was music. Never going to give you up, never going to let you down. General Varesh, supreme commander of the ZYRRX war fleet, watched the transmission in stunned silence. Across his fleet, human-made drones, captured and repurposed, were now blasting a continuous loop of an ancient Earth song on all frequencies. It was loud. It was relentless. And worst of all, his communications officers couldn't shut it off. "Report," he snapped. His second-in-command twitched nervously. "The humans have infiltrated our network. They're overriding our systems with nonsense." Varesh clenched his mandibles. This was not how war was supposed to be fought. Meanwhile, on the ground, Captain Elias Vance crouched behind a half-collapsed shuttle, watching a ZYRRX patrol move cautiously through the ruins of New Kyoto's Central Plaza. He tapped his earpiece. "Patel, tell me you're ready." Dr. Aisha Patel's voice came through, calm but exasperated. "Ready is a strong word, Captain." "Good enough. Do it." A moment later, every street lamp, hollow sign, and power grid within a 10-block radius flashed to full brightness, then shut off completely, plunging the entire zone into pitch-black darkness. The ZYRRX patrol hesitated. Then the whispers started, from every direction, from nowhere at all. Distorted human voices, ghostly and unnatural, filled the streets. Laughter, fragments of speech, the unmistakable sound of something moving just out of sight. The ZYRRX were a military species, bred for combat, but they relied on order, on precision, structured engagements, and controlled environments. This was chaos. A voice crackled through their comms. We see you. Then the first explosion tore through the street. 3 blocks away. Danny sparks. O'Malley grinned as he watched the fireball rise into the sky. Man, I love this job. Li Xiu, crouched beside him, gave a disapproving sigh. You planted explosives in a historic district. It's technically historic rubble now, Sparks offered. Vance's voice interrupted over comms. You're clear. Move to the next target. Li Xiu adjusted the strap on her rifle. We shouldn't underestimate them. They'll adapt. Sparks clapped a hand on her shoulder. Then we'll just get weirder. Back in orbit, Varesh seethed as reports flooded in. The humans weren't just resisting. They were mocking them. Their troops were impossible to track. They weren't holding static defenses like rational soldiers. They were appearing and vanishing like specters. A ZYRRX officer approached, antennae flicking in discomfort. General, we captured one of their pilots. Varesh narrowed his eyes. Bring it in. The guards dragged in a battered but grinning Sparks O'Malley, his flight suit scuffed but his confidence intact. He looked around at the towering ZYRRX warriors and let out a low whistle. Wow. Big guys, huh? Varesh loomed over him. Your people are doomed human. Sparks smirked. Funny, 'cause from where I'm standing, you guys are the ones getting your exoskeletal bits handed to you. Varesh's mandibles clicked. You fight dishonorably. You break rules of engagement. You deceive. Sparks tilted his head. Buddy, war isn't a chess game. It's poker, and we bluff better than anyone in the galaxy. At that moment, every console in the command chamber shut down. The lights flickered, and a synthetic voice, human-made, spoke in perfect ZYRRX dialect. Hello, ZYRRX High Command. This is Dr. Aisha Patel. Your network is now my network. Varesh turned as his battle map, filled with dozens of false human fleet signals, each broadcasting the same message. You only wage war against humanity once. Then the real attacks began. Captain Elias Vance had seen war before. He had fought in orbital skirmishes, led boarding actions in zero gravity, and even negotiated ceasefires with people who'd rather shoot him than shake his hand. But nothing had prepared him for this. Vance and his crew had arrived at ZYRRX Prime with the best of intentions. Humanity was still new to the galactic scene, eager to make friends, trade resources, and prove they weren't just another pre-spaceflight species crawling out of its gravity well. But the ZYRRX, a rigid, warlike species that saw diplomacy as a prelude to conquest, had no interest in peace. The meeting had been a trap. Vance sat at the center of a stark ZYRRX tribunal chamber, his hands cupped behind his back, while an alien general clicked his mandibles in what Vance could only assume was smug satisfaction. You will submit, the ZYRRX declared, or be erased. Vance looked to his crew. Dr. Aisha Patel, the ship's engineer and arguably the smartest person in any room, was already scanning their surroundings, her analytical mind likely cataloging every weak point in the chamber's security. Danny Sparks O'Malley, their ace pilot and resident chaos magnet, had a glint in his eye that Vance recognized immediately. He was planning something stupid. And Corporal Li Xiu, their cultural expert and historian, sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable. She had been the most hopeful about this mission, and Vance could see the disappointment hardening into something else. We've studied your kind, the general continued, pacing before them. Your species is young, reckless, soft. He paused, mandibles flaring. Yet troublesome. You do not know your place. Vance chuckled, rolling his shoulders despite the restraints. Yeah, we get that a lot. A murmur ran through the assembled ZYRRX officers. They had expected fear, supplication, not humor. The general's black eyes narrowed. Your colonies will burn. Your home world will kneel. It will be over quickly, and your people will serve as laborers in the Dominion. Efficient, painless. Sparks coughed, then muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear. Kinda sounds like a bad deal. The general clicked his mandibles sharply. You have no choice. Li Xiu, silent until now, finally spoke. Then you don't know humans at all. Vance felt a swell of pride, but they weren't out of this yet. He turned slightly toward Patel. Aisha, any ideas? She sighed, glancing up at the security drones hovering near the ceiling. About 17, but you're probably only going to like one of them. That's an acceptable ratio. With a small smirk, Patel twitched her fingers. Subtle, but enough for Vance to know she was triggering something. Then, from the far side of the chamber, an explosion rocked the walls. The general whirled as smoke filled the room. Vance took the opening. He drove his elbow into the nearest guard, ignoring the sharp pain as he twisted free of his bindings. Sparks was already moving, sweeping a stunned Zoarek's legs out from under it and catching its fallen weapon. Patel's explosion had come from the chamber doors, which now lay in a twisted heap. Through the smoke, Van saw human figures rushing in, survivors from their ship, armed and ready. They'd pulled off an escape. The general roared, raising a clawed limb, but before he could give the order to attack, Li Xiu stepped forward and did something unexpected. She smiled. "I'd reconsider," she said calmly. "This isn't just an escape. It's an invasion." The general hesitated. Just for a moment, Vance took the chance to punch him square in the mandibles. They sprinted through the corridors of the ZYRX capital, alarms blaring behind them. Their ship, the Resolute, had been impounded on a military base just outside the city. But Patel assured them the security system she had overridden would keep the ZYRX forces distracted long enough for them to get there. As they ran, Li Xiu jogged beside Vance, her face lined with something more than exhaustion. They're going to retaliate, hard. "I know," Vance said. Sparks, keeping pace behind them, huffed. "Well, at least they're consistent. First contact with humans always goes badly for the other guy. They don't understand what they've done," Patel added. "They think we fight like they do. Direct force, overwhelming numbers. They don't realize we're good at breaking rules." Vance nodded. Humanity had fought wars on Earth for thousands of years, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. They had adapted to every kind of warfare imaginable: guerrilla tactics, asymmetric engagements, hacking, subterfuge, and when necessary, brute force. The ZYRX, for all their militaristic might, played by a strict set of rules. They were about to learn the hard way that humans didn't. The landing bay came into view, a dozen ZYRX guard between them and their ship. Sparks grinned. "Time to make some noise." Vance smiled back. "Welcome to humanity's first war, ZYRX. Hope you enjoy the show."